The San Francisco Giants are the favorites to sign Aaron Judge if he leaves the Yankees, according to BetOnline. We'll get into it next on Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts. And coming up on today's show, the top story of the hour for me is this email I got from BetOnline that, the headline nearly made me fall over in my seat just because I wasn't expecting a headline like this, or the subject of the email. And it said, the San Francisco Giants are favored to land Aaron Judge if he leaves the Yankees. And the reason I say it caught me off guard was because we get these odds all the time, and it's not usually the Giants aren't the team in the subject line. It's the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, whoever. So just to see that team name tied to Aaron Judge. But let's just jump right into what they sent in terms of what these odds are. And again, these are the odds if he leaves the Yankees. What is the most likely team? And they actually released these same odds about a month ago, and the Giants were like ninth behind a bunch of teams, obviously, 8 other teams. And I said that made no sense. If he leaves the Yankees, I think that it does make sense to have the Giants number one here. And it has the Giants at 2-1 odds as being that next team if he leaves the Yankees. And so, look, free agency hasn't even started yet. It won't start until 5 days after the World Series ends. But we have our World Series matchup, and so we're not far away from the offseason officially getting going here. And it's going to be a frenzy, and there's going to be a lot of rumors coming out. And the reason, for those who don't know, but I'm pretty sure almost everybody does know this, that the Giants are so connected to Judge is because he is from the Bay Area and, well, kind of from the Central Valley, and grew up like Fresno area and grew up a huge Giants fan. He is a big Buster Posey fan. Just all the guys, Barry Bonds, Lincecum, Kane, like he grew up idolizing these guys. And I mean, Rich Aurilia was his favorite player, actually. And so just on and on, there's these connections there for Aaron Judge. And he's kind of hard to read. It's not clear if he wants to stay in New York or if he wants to come back to the Bay Area and be closer to home. Sometimes we make a big deal about free agents and where their hometown is, and they end up completely on the other side of the country. And maybe we put too much emphasis on where they grew up. So we don't really know with Judge, and he's been pretty private and good about keeping it a secret. But the reality is that the Giants, like the stars are kind of aligned here in that clearly they kind of seem to know that they need to do something somewhat drastic. I don't know if it has to be Aaron Judge or any of these super like top tier free agents. There's some quality players in the range who are going to be closer to $100 million versus Aaron Judge, who may get around $300 million. So it all remains to be seen. But I just thought it was interesting that the Giants are considered in the betting market, according to BetOnline, the favorites to land Aaron Judge if he doesn't end up back with the Yankees. So what would you be getting if you ended up with Aaron Judge? The reality, the one negative that I can really point to is the fact that he's going to be 31 years old in April. And so for a 7-8 year deal, you're talking about ages 37, 38 at the end of that deal. And Dan Szymborski over at Fangraphs, he's kind of graciously given us his year-by-year ZiPS projections as of, I think he did these, most recently in late September. So it's factoring in the incredible season that Judge just had. Obviously, 62 home runs, American League record and all that. And what an incredible year it was. According to Fangraphs, 11.5 wins above replacement, which is just one of the best seasons of all time. So he's coming off a truly monster season. And when we look at the projections moving forward, according to Szymborski, he has Judge at a 7.9 Fangraphs wins above replacement season in 2023, year one of a deal, with an OPS plus of 178, a 295 batting average, a 402 on base, 633 slugging, 52 home runs. I mean, I'm kind of drooling as I just read this. I assume this is at a neutral park. So going to the Giants of all parks would decrease these numbers, perhaps somewhat significantly. But in theory, like the OPS plus is park adjusted, so that would stay at around 178, which is just absurd. In year 2, 7.1 Fangraphs wins above replacement. In year 3, 6.1. In year 4, 5. In year 5, 3.8. In year 6, 2.8. In year 7, 1.8. In year 8, 0.9. So you can see a pretty sharp decline pretty much every year. The first 2 years are like excellent. The third year is still extremely good. I would actually call that excellent as well, but continuing a downward trend. And then a very good year, another downward trend, and then it just gets steeper and steeper as it goes on. And of course, this is just a projection, and what actually happens is not going to be exactly what these projections are. But the reality is age is undefeated, and it's coming for Aaron Judge. It's coming for us all. And that's the unfortunate reality, like the one drawback here of Aaron Judge. And Szymborski ran these same projections, but adjusted it to think that Judge was 5 years younger and said if he's born in 1997. Essentially, we talked about this just yesterday, but if he was 26 instead of going to be 31. So these projections year by year, in year 1, 8.9 Fangraphs wins above replacement. Year 2, 8.7. Year 3, 8.2. In year 4, 7.8. Then 7.4, 6.7, 5.9. And so Szymborski says this is a $500 million player if he's 26 and coming off the season he just had, essentially. But $300 million is pushing it over, I think, 8 years is what Szymborski says when we're looking at the reality of Judge's age. So that's what you would be getting for Aaron Judge, probably 7 or 8 years, somewhere around $300 million, but the age very much matters. And this was a mailbag question that we got. So coming up next, speaking of mailbag questions, we're going to get to some more, including what is the true reality that the Giants end up landing one of the big time hitters in free agency? I'm going to give an exact percentage estimate on my end in just a minute. But before we do, BetOnline, as I was just saying, it's your number one source, not just for Aaron Judge rumors, but for betting football and the start of the new basketball season this year. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there. And also, it's not just Aaron Judge. They've sent these odds for numerous players in free agency, and I always just think it's really interesting not just to learn what are the betting markets saying about the Giants, but also, like I said, a month ago, the Giants were much lower here. And so that was an opportunity. If you were kind of in the know about there's really a connection there with Judge, you could take advantage of those odds. And in fact, that's seemingly what happened, as now Judge has moved all the way from like 9th to the Giants to number 1. The Giants have moved all the way to number 1. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, as promised, we are going to run through some mailbag questions. That was kind of like a roundabout way of getting to one of the mailbag questions. Just a lot of questions about Aaron Judge. And I kind of can't wait in a way for the World Series to end so the offseason can get going. It's not like a dark period for the show. We have a lot going on in the offseason. There are all these deadlines that come up in November. Like right after the World Series ends, the Giants are going to have to make decisions on options for Evan Longoria. Carlos Rodon will have to make his official decision to opt out, which he will, because he can get a much bigger contract given the season he just had. And then there's qualifying offer decisions. And of course, there's free agency. So it's going to be a great time to be following the show daily, Monday through Friday on Locked On Giants. But more mailbag questions. Again, thank you so much to everyone who asked these on Twitter. There's so many good questions to get to. And Sam Berg says, what is the true reality that you see the Giants landing at least one of the big time hitters in free agency? I still have a hard time seeing the Giants landing just one of them, seeing as Oracle Park isn't a desirable ballpark to hit in. And so that's a good point, and I think it applies to a lot of the players out there. There are certain exceptions, though, like Aaron Judge, if there's this desire to play for your hometown team. Like, I think I was saying it earlier that there's this interview, I think it was with John Shea in the Chronicle, where Aaron Judge spoke about growing up as a kid and dreaming of playing for the San Francisco Giants, and that it was absolutely something that he just wanted so much when he was growing up, was to one day play for the Giants. And so he's out there. Giants are probably calling for him and going to make that pitch to him. And so I think you could perhaps convince a guy. And then this leads me to my next point, which is that for a lot of players, money truly talks. And if you're the team that is offering the best financial package, and say you even blow them away to some extent, like it's not super close, you offer them, $10-20 million more than the next best offer, not only does it talk to the players, but also there's pressure from the players union where they kind of want guys to just take the best deal because it helps future players, right? It drives up prices. And so like Corey Seager and Marcus Semien going to the Texas Rangers, it kind of made no sense in a lot of ways because a lot of players really want teams to play on teams that are contenders. I mean, think of Seager, right? Coming from the perennial playoff team, the Dodgers. I mean, not just a playoff team, but a team that's often been favored in the postseason. Not that they've capitalized on that. Ha ha, again, I'm going to take stabs at them every time I can on that. But, Seager goes to the Texas Rangers because they offered him this crazy great contract, 10 years, $325 million. I don't know what else he was being offered, but I'm sure that the reason he accepted it is because it was the best financial offer. There's also, you have to take into account taxes, right? And so that plays a role. Even if you make the same offer, California state income tax is higher than in a lot of other states. You actually pay tax based on where you're playing that day, but it's just you spend most of your time in California, given that you play half your games at home in California, and then there are other California teams you play. So anyway, money talks, but you're not asking about all that. You're saying, what are the odds? I do just want to point out, there's another player in Carlos Correa who's been pretty clear that his decision is almost exclusively driven by money, and that, he picked the Twins, another just random acquisition last offseason where he signs with the Minnesota Twins because I guess they were giving him the best contract. It was a really weird contract with multiple opt-outs, including after year one, and he hasn't yet officially opted out, but he said that he will. And so, so in terms of the ballpark not being a great place to hit, I guess if it's a short-term deal where you're trying to rebuild value, I think that would especially be a problem because you want to have a great offensive season, and it's not a great place to do that. But if you're giving these guys deals that'll basically take them for the rest of their careers, and you're offering them the best package financially, and or they have special ties to the area and they find it desirable anyway, then I think that it's not like a deal breaker for several guys. Some guys it might be, but maybe at least a handful of guys it's not going to be a deal breaker. So what are the chances they end up with, at least one of the big time hitters? So I also don't know exactly what the criteria is for what you're calling a big time hitter, but I'm going to assume we're talking Correa, Bogarts, Judge, Trey Turner. Are we considering Brandon Nimmo and Dansby Swanson the big time hitters? I'm going to say maybe not, and it's just Judge, Trey Turner, Correa, and Xander Bogaerts. I'm going to include Nimmo and Swanson in there. I don't know. I wish that you had been slightly more specific, but giving an official number on this in terms of my prediction, it really depends, because I think if you add Nimmo in there, chances go up significantly, but he's probably going to cost maybe under $100 million, and these other guys are going to be multiple hundreds of millions of dollars potentially. And so I don't know. I'm just coming up with 33%. I'm also thinking 50%. So maybe in between, maybe 33, maybe 40, 37 and a half, somewhere in that range is perhaps where I'm going if we're talking about the truly impact. Because also there's like Wilson Contreras, who we mentioned yesterday. He probably will get maybe similar to Brandon Nimmo, maybe a little bit less. I don't know exactly, but closer to 100 million versus like 200, 300 million dollars. And I think that could potentially be a sweet spot for the Giants, where they're not handing out a $300 million check to a guy who's 31, but instead you're making, a couple of $100 million players versus one $300 million player. Does that make sense for the Giants? Maybe. So I don't know. Not 0 and not like 100, but somewhere in between. That's a horrible answer. But I think it's more possible now than it ever has been. The problem is the age. Again, if these guys were 26, as Bryce Harper was when they went after him and offered him $310 million over 12 years, he was 26. Judge is 31. Correa is only going to be 28. That's why I've kind of really circled back on Carlos Correa. Trey Turner's going to be in his age 30 season, and we do age blank season based on what age you are on June 1st, April, May, July 1st. I think it's July 1st or maybe June 31st. It's around then, and it's what age are you then? And we call that your age whatever season. Bogarts is going to be in his age 30 season, Nimmo age 30 season, Judge age 31. But it also depends on how many years are you going to be able to get. So for Judge, you're talking about maybe 8 years for a guy who's already 31, versus Nimmo, it might be 4 or 5 years, and he's a year younger. And so it's possible that starts to make more sense. So it just really, in my opinion, are you counting Nimmo? Are you counting Contreras? Because if you count those guys, I might lean closer to 50+% versus 33%. So that's the way I see it. And Correa is kind of a wild card. He could be in between. Is he a guy who's going to get another deal like he got with the Twins, which was weird, 3 years, $100 million basically? Or is he going to be a guy who gets that long-term deal, $250 million over 8 years or something? It depends. And I think the Giants will end up with someone significant. That's kind of as specific as I can be with that answer there. So coming up in just a minute, will they spend serious money? That's like a totally different question, because you could spread it around. And how do we define serious? We'll get into what I expect financially, specifically from the Giants in just a minute. But first, all right, as promised, we are going to get to more mailbag questions. I'll try to move a little bit quicker. I got wrapped up in that answer there. But at 999 Shill asks, will serious money be spent this offseason to improve the team and make the on-field product less boring? So we must define serious money. And I've had questions like, how big of a contract can the Giants give? And the way I always like to answer this question is that I think we more so need to think of it in terms of average annual value versus the total contract. Like this idea that, Farhan Zaidi won't make $100 million commitment. I just think it's bogus. First of all, there's the Bryce Harper offer, which is not just a rumor, but multiple reputable reporters have reported that they offered him 12 years, $310 million, and they finished second in that sweepstakes. And he was a rare elite player who was 26 at the time of reaching free agency. It just doesn't happen very often. And when it happened, they were there and they made that effort to try to sign him. I'm getting off topic a little bit, but in terms of, that's a $300 million contract. But when you break it out over 12 years, $310 million divided by 12 years is only $25.8 million a year. And so, yes, it's a $300 million deal, but it's roughly the same amount that they paid this year to Carlos Rodon. So it's just like that salary every year for 12 years. And I don't think they would do something like that for a pitcher, but for a position player of the caliber of Bryce Harper, at the age that he was, they were willing to do it. So when you say, will they spend serious money? I think they have serious money to spend just to get back to the payroll that they had this year, which was about $162 million. Now, if Carlos Rodon opts out and factoring in all the arbitration estimates for their, 13 arbitration eligible players, it comes out to they have about $100 million that they will have spent. And that's with arbitration, which are non-guaranteed. So they can non-tender guys, and that would go down even more. But let's just say they bring most of them back. It's still probably going to be about $100 million spent, and they were at $162 million just last year. And so they have at least $60 million to spend, I would say, on 2023 salaries. But there's no reason they should be capped at 162 million. Say they push it to 180. Even if they get crazy, which wouldn't even be that crazy, but it would be great for fans, and they go past 180, closer to 200. There's no salary cap in baseball, and the luxury tax threshold, unfortunately, the Giants' spending has been so well below it that I don't even remember exactly what it is. I think it's now up to like 230 million before you start getting penalized for spending a luxurious amount of money. But Giants are well below that, and so there's no salary cap. They could spend whatever they want. They just get taxed at higher and higher tiers when they pass certain thresholds. But I would say 100% guaranteed they're going to at least get to 160 million. So that gives them 60 million in 2023 spending, i.e. you could sign two $30 million players if you want, just to get back to a modest 160 million-ish number. But if you blow past that and we call it, 180, can they do 180? Reportedly, they offered Trevor Story about 20 million a year last year towards the end of the offseason, and that would have pushed them to 180. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to do that, especially another year removed from the pandemic with more attendance this year. It wasn't great, but at least there were fans. And so, they recouped some of they continue to recover from the 2020 season. So in other words, I do think serious money will be spent. It's a possibility that it's more of these kind of threading the needle signings. I'm not saying like platoon players. I'm saying more like the Wilson Contreras, Brandon Nimmo, maybe Jose Abreu, Anthony Rizzo, like not the elite ones, but the ones a tier below or a tier or two below, both, maybe a mixture. And also there's trade possibilities. And a lot of people are asking me about trade possibilities, and I just want to address the reason I'm not necessarily answering those is because I intend to go through team by team and compile a list, and I just haven't done this yet. It's going to take a lot of time to do that. I've kind of done a preliminary look, and it's not the greatest trade market I've ever seen, except for the fact that Shohei Ohtani may ultimately end up getting traded this offseason. And then if that happens, all bets are off, and the Giants should be in on that as well. And we've talked at length about that during this offseason so far. So anyway, I think I kind of answered that question. I think the payroll will 100% be at least what it was last year. And hopefully I'm pretty optimistic that it'll finally go to a higher level, maybe 180, hopefully beyond, because there's no reason it couldn't be beyond. Anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reaction, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a lot, so thank you so much in advance, and thank you to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.